Kelly Loeffler, the senator from Georgia, turned over documents to the DOJ, the Security and Exchange Commission, and the Senate Ethics Committee yesterday. Loeffler's spokesperson says the documents will show that she and her husband's stock trades were handled by an independent third-party advisor. She denies any wrongdoing. That release comes after Senator Richard Burr stepped down from his post as the Senate Intelligence Committee chairman. That decision coming after the FBI seized his cell phone. Burr made more than 24 stock transactions in February after receiving a private briefing on the pandemic. Here he was explaining his decision to step down as the Senate Intel chair.
Everybody ought to let this investigation play out.
Are you planning to participate in cooperating with investigators?
I have been since the beginning.
So you resigned your chairmanship. Why did you choose to make that decision?
This is a distraction to the hard work of the committee and the members, and I think the security of the country is too important to have a distraction.
Also, Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein is being investigated by the FBI. Reports say Feinstein was asked basic questions about her husband's stock sales during the early stages of the coronavirus outbreak. Feinstein, who is the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, her husband sold millions of stock in a California biotech company. Feinstein has denied any wrongdoing and says she has no involvement in her husband's financial decisions. Joining me now to talk more about this is the president of the Government Accountability Institute and New York Times bestselling author Peter Schweizer. His latest book is called Profiles in Corruption: Abuse of Power by America's Progressive Elites. So Senators Feinstein, Burr, and Loeffler, as well as Jim Inhofe, were all found to have sold stock shortly before the coronavirus pandemic, specifically on Burr. He's the one who seems to be in the most trouble. Peter, you've been looking at this issue for a long time, and thanks to your journalism, we have the Stock Act in Congress, which is supposed to prevent members of Congress from trading on insider information, which is hard to believe it wasn't illegal until a few years ago. But when you look at what Burr is accused of doing here, where does this stack up in all the research you've done on this topic?
Well, I think Burr's case is particularly egregious for a couple of reasons. And when you're looking at insider trading or irregular trades, you're looking at a couple of things. Did the person, in this case, Senator Burr, make trades that were uniquely advantageous? In other words, are they kind of an average stock picker, but all of a sudden they had a series of amazingly good trades? In the case of Burr, yes. He did that in just as the pandemic was getting off the ground, but before the general public knew about it. He sold, I believe it was 34 different sales of stock in a single day. And those ended up being very beneficial. The second thing you're looking for is unusual stock trading activity. And again, here with Burr, he sold, we only know in ranges how much he sold, but he sold upwards of $1.7 million worth of stock. His net worth is only $2 million or so. The point being is he sold a lot of stock at a very specific time. So it's probably clearly the most egregious of the group, and I think warrants the investigation that's taking place right now.
And we're finding out about this information because these senators are required to disclose this information to the public. Why did Burr seem to think he was going to get away with it?
Great question. I don't know. You know, I think a lot of times elected officials don't think people are paying attention to these matters when they are, whether it's reporters or whether it's the opposition party. But I think also in Burr's case, look, he's going to lose his seat in 2022. He's not running for re-election. It may be a case where he just doesn't care. But the bottom line with all of these senators, Republicans and Democrats, they really don't have anybody to blame but themselves because they're essentially saying, trust me, I did nothing wrong. And there's no basis we have for knowing that. I don't think individual senators should be trading stock. They should put their assets in a blind trust. That removes, I think, largely any doubt as to whether they're engaging in these trades themselves. And for them to just say, well, I had no involvement with that trade, we're left taking the word of a politician. Right. And that's not a very good ground to be on.
And perception now is always the problem, right? Especially because so many people are struggling with this. In Kelly Loeffler, it seems like they're pushing the idea that they have a lot of documentation that will prove that she had no direct contact with her third-party financial advisors. They're the ones who handled everything for her. Do you think she's out of the woods here, or is she in just as much trouble as Burr?
Well, I think in the case of Loeffler, it's not as egregious as it was with Senator Burr. But the problem with Senator Loeffler is that, look, she's saying that her husband, who's the head of the company that runs the New York Stock Exchange, has particular requirements because of his position. So they're not supposed to be having regular communication with their brokers. But the problem is we have to take their word for it. Why did they not simply put their assets in a blind trust, which would prevent them legally from having any communication with the trustee of those shares? They could have avoided a lot of headache had they simply done that. Now they're left trying to explain this, and generally people today are very skeptical about political figures who are trying to explain their way out of what looks like a troubling transaction.
And as you write about in Profiles of Corruption, one of the challenging things here to try and enforce this is when you're married or a family member of somebody in power, it gets even harder. Hunter Biden being a perfect example of which you do a good job of exposing that in the book. Great to talk to you as always, Peter. A real pleasure to get your insight.
Thanks for having me.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel, now in 65 million homes. Get Newsmax TV on all the major cable systems or go to newsmaxtv.com and click on the Find Newsmax tab to locate us. Remember, Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.